Quilty is brought to you by
Baby Lock. Baby Lock sewing and long arm machines. From piecing to long arming for the love of sewing. Aurifil. Aurifil Italian thread. Perfectly suited for all your quilting projects. Dear Stella. A unique fabric brand with modern style. Fairfield. Together, we can make beautiful things. Hovels Sewing. Cut to the point with Hovels Sewing. Moda. Make something quilty with Moda fabrics. Northcott. Cottons that feel like silk. Omnigrid. Providing quilters with specialty rulers and accessories for over 30 years. Hello out there. Thanks for watching Quilty this week. I'm Mary Fons and I'm joined by Kelly Biscopink. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me.
You know, Kelly writes for Quilty magazine. I love your column. You have such a clear voice, and it's great. A quilter who writes. I mean, this is our stuff. And tell me about this.
This is my book, Modern Designs for Classic Quilts. I co-authored it with my friend Andrea Johnson.
Really cool.
It's published by F&W Media.
Yes, F&W Media. Shout out to F&W, our parent company here at Quilty. Go F&W. So clearly Kelly is an accomplished quilter. How long have you been making quilts?
Since I was 7 or 8 years old. I made my first one in first or second grade.
With rainbow colors, right?
Of course.
Of course.
Yes.
Rainbow colors. If there was My Little Pony panels, probably that would have been involved.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, today we're going to talk about pressing seams. We press a lot of seams on the show, but we thought we'd dive in a little bit because there's stuff to know. You know, making patchwork is cutting, sewing, and pressing, and ripping. And ripping. But pressing is really important if you want to make your patchwork pretty. So, Kelly, will you take me through some of the things that you've brought today and some lessons that you'd like to teach?
Sure. First up, I'll just say that one of the most important things about pressing is just doing that. Pressing. Yes. You don't want to iron your fabric like you were ironing a shirt.
Right.
So when you go to press a seam, whether you're going to press it open or closed, which we'll get to in a moment, it's very important to press it first as you've taken it out from the sewing machine.
I'm going to put it right up in there. Yep.
So give it a good press there. That helps sink your seams down into the fabric and really solidifies everything.
And show with the iron just that motion.
You're going to want to just give it a good hard press like that.
Right.
You're not going to go like this.
Yes, no smushing.
Right. And then from there, you can really go on to pressing open or closed, which is where some of the decision making comes in.
Yes.
I will say too that I almost exclusively use a dry iron.
Oh yeah.
I've found that steam can do some nasty things to your fabric, particularly when you have bias seams.
Exactly.
So from there, we can start making decisions about how we want to press our seam open. And you pretty much have two choices. You can either press your seam to the side, or you can press it open, right down the middle.
And we were talking earlier, we're both press closed to the side gals. Tell me why you feel this is important.
First of all, it's faster, for sure.
Oh, doing this and like you can burn your fingers trying to open a seam like that. It's for the birds. Just how I feel about it. Some people will hate me for saying it, but continue. Sorry.
Well, there are definitely good reasons for pressing open, which we'll get to in a minute. But I always press to the side when I can because I think it just makes for a stronger seam in general. Things tend to stay straighter, and you can get just a nice, crisp edge on your seam.
She's right. She's right. And then, but pressing open, which you might do, and we're going to look at examples of why, but one of the reasons that pressing closed is good is when you quilt your quilt, you won't be pulling up batting from the bottom, which is called bearding, and you won't be stitching through your stitches. You're stitching through the seam, or quilting through the seam. Okay, so that is that. So tell me about the next thing we have here. Oh yeah, you've got an example of open.
So just a little example here. One of the most typical things that you'll see when pressing seams is to utilize what's called nesting. So when you press your seams to the side, let's see if we can find the other example.
Guy?
Not sure where he went. I can show you on this.
Okay, yeah.
So I'll show you pressing open first. These guys have been pressed open. We're just going to make a little four-patch here. When you put these right sides together, you're going to have to look. You're going to have to peel back that seam allowance and make sure that your seams are aligning, and then you'll put your pins in and sew. If you press to the side, like this, you can actually interlock those seams together, and you can feel it with your fingers when the seam's aligned correctly. So it gives you a nice tactile way to feel that your seam's together too.
Exactly. That we like nesting here on Quilty. Okay, and then we've got something like this, which is press to the dark.
Correct. That is one of the most typical rules you'll hear when it comes about pressing seams. Press toward the dark side. People like to make Star Wars jokes.
Yes, of course.
But so if you press your seams underneath the dark, you will avoid having anything shadow through under a light fabric.
It matters less when you're using really high quality fabric. I mean, you know, the Modas, the Deer Stellas, the Northcotts, you know, it's not going to be so bad. But if you don't, it's going to be...
You always run the risk.
Yeah, red and white quilts, you're going to have a problem.
And sometimes you can't have everything. Sometimes you'll make a rule about the quilt, about how you're going to press your seams, and then you discover that based on that rule, you have to press under the lighter fabric. And you just have to go with it.
And sometimes you can do both in one block.
Sometimes you can do both.
One unit, yeah.
You can be flexible. So when I sewed this little hourglass block together, I used a nesting method here where those seams interlocked. But then when I pressed that open, I decided to press that middle seam open to reduce the bulk right in the middle.
And speaking of bulk, let's move along to some of these examples where we have a lot of seams coming together and we need to give our block a break.
Yes. So this is just a good example, and we'll get to even more so in a minute, but you have a lot of seam coming together right at the middle point of a quilt block, and you just want that point to lie really nice and flat.
Yes.
So that would be a good reason to maybe press a seam open.
Yes, and not only is it better for the block, I mean, when you're quilting and you have a huge knot of fabric in there, I mean, you know, it can throw some
Really
stuff
bump
off,
up on
man.
you.
Yeah.
This even more so here. We have, you know, 8 seams coming together all in the middle. And that's a lot of fabric.
Yeah, and I find, well, with paper piecing, it's a little bit different, but yeah, you get a lot of bulk with that. Tell me about twisted seams.
Anytime you're sewing,
you get twisted seams.
It's just going to happen.
It is.
But you know, it's a good thing to be aware of. If you press your seams, these are obviously pressed open, and there are several examples here of where when I've run the seam under my presser foot, things have gotten pressed over and they've gotten twisted. I clearly have not ripped this out, Mary.
Exactly.
I made a choice.
Exactly, and I like your choice because it's
Thank
real.
you.
So this is when you're sewing and your seam is maybe facing you, but somehow when you go through the machine, it gets turned the other way. And yeah, it's really not that big of a deal, but if it bothers you, rip it out and do it again.
Yep. Something to watch out for.
You're crazy, but it's okay. And then what we've talked about here, it works on the macro level as well, right? So if you have your quilt top here, tell me about this.
So I think it's just really important when you are making a quilt, if the quilt pattern gives you pressing instructions, just go ahead and follow them. Even if you don't know why, there's probably a good reason that you'll discover. But if they don't give you pressing instructions, just take a few minutes to think through the assembly of your quilt before deciding on a pressing method. So for this quilt, these are just obviously 2 blocks that are going to be sewn together right next to each other. And I have made sure that when I go to join these blocks together, that my rows, my block seams are going to nest together just like on that 4 patch that I showed you earlier. If you kind of don't think through that, what might end up happening is you go to put your blocks together and everything is pressed the same direction.
You get a big, bulky seam.
Exactly.
Well, in the time that we have left, so thank you very much for that. In the time that we have left, to show us these really 2 quick little notions that you brought that are fantastic. This is a special ruler with a groove inside it right here, and it helps you lock down in place.
So this is a block lock ruler, and they have several of them for different styles of blocks, but just for the purposes of this, I brought a half square triangle one. This helps you to square up your half square triangles, and what it does is it locks onto the press seam, but it'll only do it if you've pressed your seam to the side. So based on the tools that you want to use, that's another good reason to kind of think through your pressing process before you get started. If you press this seam open, this tool's not going to do you any good.
Pretty interesting. But for all the open seam pressers out there, we have a notion for you too.
We do. This is called the strip stick, and it's almost just like a little pillow built up on a stick that what you do is, if you want to press your seam open, you lay it right up on there, and then you just press along that little pillow edge, and it helps just curve all your seams down just an extra little bit. Also, when you're sewing, like, say, jelly rolls together a long ways and you have a whole lot of seams right next to each other, it keeps those other seams out of the way so your iron's not hitting them.
Very helpful. Kelly, thank you so much. You're a font of information.
Well, thank you for having me.
Will you come back on Quilty?
Yes.
Awesome. We will see you soon, and we'll see you soon, too.
Quilty is brought to you by
Baby Lock. Baby Lock sewing and long arm machines. From piecing to long arming for the love of sewing. Aurifil. Aurifil Italian thread. Perfectly suited for all your quilting projects. Dear Stella. A unique fabric brand with modern style. Fairfield. Together, we can make beautiful things. Hovels Sewing. Cut to the point with Hovels Sewing. Moda. Make something quilty with Moda fabrics. Northcott. Cottons that feel like silk. Omnigrid. Providing quilters with specialty rulers and accessories for over 30 years.